Hello, I'm here. This is my channel, and I'm going to be doing a review of this new Jurassic World movie, Rebirth. This is kind of a soft reboot of the Jurassic Park / World franchise. A new director coming in, new stars coming in. The original writer, actually, of the first Jurassic Park, David Coep, is back for the screenplay on this one. Gareth Edwards is directing it, who is probably best known for his sci-fi stuff, Rogue One, and The Creator. And then you have Scarlett Johansson, Jonathan Bailey, Mahershala Ali, and Rupert Friend as the stars of this film. And I will just preface this by saying I have not seen any of the Jurassic World movies. In fact, the only Jurassic movie I've seen, period, is the original, which, I quite like. Obviously, it's a classic. It's really, really good. But so far, every other film within this franchise just seems kind of like a rehash of that original film. And so I can't really speak on how this compares to anything other than the original, but I will say that this does feel quite a bit like a rehash, and is still nevertheless kind of fun, but undeniably flawed. Let's start with the good first, though. The dinosaur sequences are actually quite good. A lot of great moments within this film. I think they really capture like the beauty and the majesty of dinosaurs, as well as obviously the terror. Some pretty good tension, some like well-constructed sequences and scenes within this film, and a lot of different like variation within the dinosaurs, I guess. The score is always going to hit, and there's a scene in particular that kind of captures the ethereal nature of dinosaurs existing that I think is really great, and like the original theme plays, obviously, and it just feels really epic and great. The film visually looks pretty solid, as well as the majority of Gareth Edwards films do. It looks a little bit generic whenever they're like on the boat, but whenever they get into the forest and the jungle, I think it looks a lot better. The cinematography is quite gorgeous. The green of the plants just really pops on screen. And a lot of great moments where, you have the scale of the dinosaurs kind of compared to the smallness of the human characters that I think is pretty clever, if not kind of obvious, because visually it does take a lot of notes from the original Spielberg film. And then we'll get into the negatives of this film, which is mainly the script I find to be really, really lacking, as well as a lot of the performances. It's difficult to know where one starts and the other ends. I'll start with the lead, Scarlett Johansson, who I like pretty often. I think she's a pretty good actress, but she is not doing great in this movie. She's kind of like on smile and quip autopilot, and her characterization doesn't really give her a lot to work with dramatically. So she's just sort of like a faceless, characterless person who is just trying to be as charming as possible. But because a lot of the jokes and one-liners are so weak, even Scarlett Johansson isn't really able to make much out of the script. Same thing with a lot of the other performances, although I will briefly mention Jonathan Bailey, who is quite a standout and is able to make even his most clumsily written dialogue feel natural and just be genuinely charming. There's this particular moment where he's like soaking in the beauty of the dinosaurs that I thought was like actually pretty great acting within a film that doesn't have a lot of great performances, which is baffling because, the majority of these people I quite like. Scarlett Johansson, obviously an Oscar-nominated actress. Mahershala Ali has won 2 Oscars in his career, and yet he gets nothing to do within this movie. I find his whole character to just be very bland, and the only moments when the character is even remotely interesting is just mainly Mahershala Ali adding a lot of his genuine and natural charisma into the character. None of it is really on the page. There's a couple moments where they're trying to like build the emotions and build the stakes for these characters, and I just find a lot of these exposition character building moments to be incredibly weak. A lot of really forced, bland, and contrived dialogue and exposition that just doesn't really work and really gets in the way of the film. A lot of talking when there could be more dinosaur scare stuff. And I somewhat appreciate the fact that within especially the second and third acts, the film largely abandons having like any sort of character building or message or point really at all other than pure entertainment. I wish that they had been aware enough to know that that is really all that audiences wanted from this film, but there are still so many moments where they're like trying to get character moments that just never really work. There's this whole subplot with this family family, and the dad disapproves of his daughter's boyfriend, and then at some point he like grows to like him. And I just found all that to be pretty boring. Not a lot of emotions to be tacked on to the narrative of this film or to the characters of this film. And a lot of them are just kind of used as fodder to be eaten by dinosaurs. Even some of the plot mechanics are a little baffling and don't really work. A lot of like plot logistic inconsistencies and stuff that I just don't think makes a lot of sense. The whole like central idea of like them going to get the blood of 3 different big dinosaurs so that they can like cure heart disease is just kind of stupid, and that stupidity really like rings true for the majority of the script, which just feels very lazy and like it really is in desperate need of a rewrite. This feels like a first draft that they just sort of ran with, and the film really suffers for it, especially within the first act, which is honestly a chore to get through because there isn't a lot of dinosaur spectacle. It's just people talking and the plot being built up in a pretty boring way. And ultimately, this is just a pretty bland blockbuster that is not very funny even when it's trying to be, is not very emotional when it's trying to be, and is really only mildly entertaining. The movie stars are certainly trying their best, I would say, although I do think Mahershala and Scarlett Johansson are kind of phoning it in here. But they really can't make much of this script, even if they were trying. And I just find most of this to be pretty flat and generally just quite generic. There are positives here. The score is good. Like I said, the visuals are okay. Jonathan Bailey is a highlight. But ultimately, I found this to be pretty forgettable and honestly a little bit frustrating to watch at times, as it was trying to do certain things that it just wasn't really able to do. The script has some ideas that could be interesting, but they never really build upon them in any compelling way. And as a result, most of this film just falls flat for me. And I don't know. It's kind of fun in a sense. It's entertaining to like watch dinosaurs do stuff, but a lot of the character, a lot of the human stuff within this film really, really does not work for me. So yeah, I thought it was just a mildly entertaining blockbuster that ultimately I will probably forget within the next week. So I would give Jurassic World Rebirth a 2 out of 5. Not that great. Maybe wouldn't recommend it, but if you like dinosaurs, I guess go watch it. That's about it. So yeah, next week I'm gonna be reviewing Eddington, a very different film from this one, and that's all I got. So goodbye.